Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. I'm going to air quote that and call this a webinar conversation, where we continue the discussion about artificial intelligence and assistive tech. I'll give a plug for one of our other events that we did already, which we started to have a conversation about this in our monthly Makers Roundtable. I'll give you a link to that in a little bit. It's in one of the slides. So this is, I like to call this a continuation of that conversation. And what this new kind of area of focus may bring for us in the assistive technology world. And if you would like the slides, I would encourage you to take the slides. They are chock full of resources. I'm going to put the link in the chat as well. There's a QR code on the slide if you would like it. The link is bit.ly/ATAC022823, today's date. And there's the link in the chat. If nothing else, that will take you to all the resources. We're going to use a Jamboard as we go through our conversation to add things. And so that link will be in there as well. Obviously, you can add anything you'd like in the chat. If it's pertaining to the Jamboard, I will make sure I transfer it over. And we will get all of that information in there. So the slides will give you one spot to go back to get all of this information as we go through. All right, so hopefully you got the links. If not, it's in the chat. Should be all set. This is the ATAC crew who is behind the scenes and in front of the scenes helping us today as we have this conversation. Naomi's in the chat. I think Peyton might be in the chat, but I'm not positive.
Hi, everyone.
There she is. Peyton is our newest staff member at ATAC, and she is here on the webinar as well. And that's me. I'm Mike Murata. I'm the director of the ATAC program here in New Jersey. We're excited to be here with you today. And because this is an ATAC webinar, good news. You get to hear all about the services we do for just 2 minutes. If you are from New Jersey, we are very excited about that. We can be a resource for you. We are the New Jersey Assistive Technology Act project. We can provide you with a whole host of assistive technology information and services, demonstrations of technology. We can set you up with a loan of equipment to try things out, and we can also set you up with our device reuse program. That's if you're in New Jersey. For things like this, obviously we open it up to everybody, so information like this is just out there as information, but those services are specifically for our New Jersey friends that are in the webinar with us today and who are watching later. We have all our socials are listed on the screen. We have a Twitter page. We have a Facebook group. We have an Instagram. I believe we even have a newly launched and minted TikTok that Peyton is now working on. So we are really just right on the edge, cutting edge, if you will, of all this stuff. You can search us at the various ways they are: ATAC, ATAC-NJ for Twitter, ATAC of DRNJ on Facebook, and then ATAC of DRNJ on Instagram. That'll get you to all our services. If you are, again, I feel bad for everybody who's not from New Jersey. I feel bad for you anyway that you're not from New Jersey, but for the rest of you who are not in New Jersey, I'm sorry, this doesn't pertain to you. But if you are here in New Jersey or work in New Jersey, you have access now to the ATIA Recorded Learning Center. So you have free access to all of the materials that are available in that learning center. If you've not ever visited the ATIA Learning Center, it is a catalog of recorded webinars and conference sessions about assistive technology, and they all have a fee associated with them. Through our AT Act, we have purchased a yearly subscription for the people of New Jersey to use. So if you live or work in New Jersey, you can have free access. The link is on the screen. The QR code is on the screen. I will type the link into the chat for that. That is bit.ly/ATAC-ATIA. That will get you to a form that you'll fill out that basically just asks you, where do you live or where do you work? And then we'll send you the code and you can get all those webinars for free. Finally, one more thing, and then I promise we'll start. We are hosting several events in the next month here in New Jersey. Again, if you're around or close, we would welcome you to these two events. We have a a full day inclusive technology education conference happening on Saturday, March 25th. Down in West Windsor, so closer to Trenton, Princeton area. And then we are doing a 2-day intro to pod training at the very end of the month, the 30th and 31st. If you want to check that out, you can go to our website. All of this is listed on our website, at4nj.org. That's the number 4, at4nj.org. All right. All of that's out of the way. Let's get to what we're going to talk about. So this is what we're talking about today, all these AI tools and how we might use them as AT. I felt this really burning desire to add the disclaimer there. We won't have all the answers. I don't know if we'll have any of the answers, but I think between us as a group, we might have really great conversation about some of the questions and some of the possible uses for this as we go forward. But now that I've put that disclaimer out there, I feel the whole weight is lifted off my back now for the rest of our time together. We'll start with kind of what is it that we're talking about? What facilitated this kind of need to jump into this conversation? And part of it was this all of a sudden explosion of everyone wanting to talk about ChatGPT, this AI bot that lives online that allows you to ask questions and it generates text based on what you're asking. And so as we go through this started this whole conversation of, well, what's going to happen now with this? What is this going to do for us? How can this be used, good or bad? We'll get into those conversations in a second about this, but mostly it's really one of those moments in time where some new tool has dropped into the forefront of the collective consciousness, and we have to decide how this can be beneficial. Newsflash, I'll tell you where I live on this model. This is going to be great. I think this is excellent. I'm a big fan of this. I'm a big fan of disruptive tech, and this to me is disruptive in the best possible way. I'll give us a quick demo in a second if you've never seen it. If you have used it and you want to drop your initial thoughts about this into the chat, feel free. I would love to have that in there as we go through. I know we did this same kind of conversation last week for a meeting for the state leaders in AT education. And there was a nice mix of people that had never seen this work, and then people that had a kind of an understanding. And we had a very small chunk of the group that actually had used it before. And I'll go to the site. I put a video here just in case the site was bogged down and I couldn't get to it, because I know that happened last time I tried to show this to somebody. The site was busy and it wouldn't let me load in, but I will go to it as a live demo in a second. So you're basically asking questions of this, dropping in requests, and it is processing text and putting that out there for you. This is the main screen of the ChatGPT. The highlight that I really wanted to pull out in the conversation as we start to get into it was the fact that it puts these limitations right on the front page, which I think are really good and really important to remember. May occasionally generate incorrect information. Good to know. May occasionally produce harmful instructions at biased content. And then finally, that has limited knowledge of events in the world after 2021. So this is working on a language model that had been pulled together from information that was prior to 2022. So anything that's happened now, from that, you might not get a good information. I'm glad that people are interested in this as they're putting it in the chat. Let me jump over into it. So here we are. Let's see how it does for us. Does someone have a prompt they would like me to ask it? Otherwise, you're leaving me to my own devices, which is, sometimes good, sometimes not good. Anybody have something you would like to ask it?
Mike, what if you ask it to provide reasons why ChatGPT will not keep students from learning how to generate their own ideas and information?
Okay, fine. Provide reasons why tools like ChatGPT will not. Say that again, Kathy.
Why ChatGPT will not keep students from learning how to generate their own ideas and information. or something like that.
I'm not going to write and something like that. I'll write that as a follow-up question. Or well, what a bummer that was, right? After all that, after my quality typing that you all got to say. Give me a second. Let me try it. Let me reload the page. Because now I want the answer to that, Ken. All right, let's see. As it's continuing to write, which is taking a lot longer than it should, but that's okay. We'll let that continue on. It's a response. One of the powerful pieces about tools like this, like ChatGPT, is this is not a one-time ask it a question, get a response. This is a conversation that I can continue to ask questions and refine the conversation and get more information from it. So once we see what it generates, I could provide some kind of follow-up information. We did this in the Slate meeting last week, where we had it generate some information about how accessible educational materials could be beneficial to students in the classroom. And then we asked it to provide citations for where it found that information, and it provided some of that information to us. So here we go. It's continuing to put a whole lot of information on the page. There are several reasons why tools like ChatGPT will not keep students from learning how to generate their own ideas and information. ChatGPT is a tool that relies on existing data to generate responses. While it can produce high quality responses, it is still limited by the information it has been trained on. Therefore, students will still need to generate their own ideas and conduct their own research to expand their knowledge beyond what is currently available to the AI model. ChatGPT is not a substitute for critical thinking skills. While it can provide useful insights and suggestions, students will still need to analyze and evaluate the information they receive from ChatGPT and other sources to form their own opinions and ideas. And it's continuing on. Number 3, ChatGPT is not designed to replace human interaction and collaboration. Learning often involves interacting with others and sharing ideas, and tools like ChatGPT cannot replicate the social and emotional aspects of learning that occur through discussion and collaboration with peers and teachers. Finally, we have number 4, ChatGPT is not a comprehensive learning tool. It can provide answers to specific questions, but it cannot provide a comprehensive understanding of a subject or topic. Students will need to engage in a variety of learning activities, such as reading, writing, and hands-on experimentation, to develop a deep understanding of the subject. In summary, while tools like ChatGPT can be useful for generating ideas and information, they cannot replace the critical thinking, collaboration, and learning experiences that are essential for students to develop their own ideas and knowledge. On the surface of that, sure, that all sounds great. That sounds like a good answer. Well thought out, lots of information. I think when we start looking at that makes sense. And people in the chat are talking about the idea of fact checking information. Michael points out that he's noticed that the citations were sometimes generated and did not exist. I had read an article similar to that it had generated citations that were not real. Some were, some weren't. And again, those are some of these conversations we need to have as we go through, is thinking about what are we using this for and how are we using it. And I could continue on with the conversation of it. I'll come back out of it for a second. We could always
Mike,
go back.
this is,
Yeah, go ahead. Who said that?
Yeah, this is
Shelley, hey.
Hi, this is Shelley Haven. Haven't spoken to you in a while.
Good.
Anyway, so at this point, you'd probably go back and maybe rephrase that question
Mhm.
to say what I think was perhaps on Catherine's mind is, how can we prevent it from, kids from doing their homework and it writing essays for them, which might be more the thrust of the concern, as opposed to coming up with ideas, which it's good at, but writing essays, that's a different issue.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Shelley. I think you're absolutely right. I think we start thinking about this, and when we talk about some of the skills that are critical to using tools like this, it's your question asking skills becomes so powerful and so important. This idea of how are you making sure you are asking the right thing in order to get the information you want. Yao says it in the chat. Exactly. Input determines output. That's perfect. I mean, we should just hang up right now. I mean, there it is. That's the answer for sure. Thinking about what that looks like as we go through it. That's an example of a text generating tool for AI, ChatGPT. I don't know if anybody's used DALL-E, which is a picture generating tool using AI. So you then are creating images through descriptions or uploading images and asking the AI to modify those in some way. We won't go to that one too, but the link is there inside that behind it. So you could certainly click on that and get in there. But those are two of the bigger ones that people are talking about. And while those two are starting to get most of the conversation, I wanted to maybe be broader with our discussion here of this concept and move away from this being a ChatGPT webinar and more about an AI webinar, thinking a little broader, thinking about what this looks like and what its possible impact will be as we go forward, because there are plenty of AI tools out there. This is an example. This is a screen grab of a website called There's an AI for That. So the website is there'sANAIforthat.com. And this is a list of as of yesterday, when I pulled this picture down, there are 2,050 AIs for 524 different tasks updated daily. So there are other tools out there beyond ChatGPT. And Chris points it out, it's been around for years and we don't even think of it necessarily as AI. It's just that now that's become kind of the term all of a sudden as people have latched onto this idea of ChatGPT. You're going to see a picture when we talk about educational ideas that I pulled up, and it has a picture of AI tools for your classroom. Some of these are going to look very familiar, and we never called them AI tools before. We just used them, never thinking about what was happening behind them. And so the big question, again, I don't have an answer for it. I kind of have an answer. When does AI become assistive technology? That's the big question. One, that's the question that people are starting to ask, is when does this type of tool become AT? Well, if we go to the definition of AT, which is on the screen, the AT device is any item, piece of equipment, or product system, whether you acquire it commercially off the shelf, modify it, or customize it, that is used to increase, maintain, or improve the functional capabilities of an individual with a disability. If it does that, well, then it's assistive technology. I think what we're starting to see, and I've even had some of these experiences already working in education, where people are asking to write AI tools into an IEP as an AT tool. And so that is the start of that conversation, but it feels like, again, we're in one of those situations where people are doing the tool first and then worrying about the actual reason why. And so I'm constantly bringing these people back to this concept of the set framework and what is it you're trying to do? Maybe AI is the AT tool for you. Maybe it's not. You haven't said what you want it for. And so thinking about the task that you need to accomplish with that person will help dictate what that tool is at the end. It goes back to my constant, I feel like I always do this to people, but I just say why to them all the time. Well, I need this as AT. Well, why? Explain the rationale of why this is so critical for you as you go forward. Maybe it is AT. It could very well be AT for you. It's just this idea of having people look at this in the correct way. And then our other big question too, again, I don't know if I'll answer either of them. Well, how will AI and tools like this disrupt everything? Education, higher ed, the workplace, assistive tech, everything. This is starting to have a feel like the iPad when the iPad was introduced in 2010. This is having that same kind of feel. It's having that same kind of moment where, after the iPad came out, the way we looked at assistive technology fundamentally changed for a lot of situations. And so this has that same feel, like we had in the past. If we can remember back to when the iPad came out, what happened there is a lot of people got very excited about the tools. And what did we have? iPads for everybody. Everything needed an iPad. An iPad was the only answer. And we lost track again of the why. Why do you need that tool? So here we are again. And are we doomed to repeat the same situation? I don't know. I hope not, but we'll see. It's interesting because from the calls that we're getting about this, and maybe some of you are getting the same kinds of feedback from people, we might be doomed to repeat this if we don't continue to put people's kind of mindset and shift them a bit as they're coming into this tool, as they think about it. So as we go forward, a couple things, and a lot of this, like I said, I'm just going to drop out resources for you as we go. We have been compiling a Wakelet of just resources we come across every time something pops up for some kind of AI and ChatGPT, any of this stuff that we see pop up. We drop it in this Wakelet, and so we did make that open that anyone can access. I don't know if it's open for anybody to add to, but it is certainly open for you to view. If you have something you want to add to that, let us know, and we'll drop it in there as we go. But like anything else, we're in kind of a collecting information phase right now, and trying to understand how to implement it and what that looks like. And so the thought was 3 big areas, and I'll give you some examples in each: educational impact, kind of higher ed and workplace. I'm going to cram them together. And then finally, community, looking at it as an impact related to assistive tech. So that's the thought. We do have a Jamboard for you to add to. I will put that link in the chat as well, or you can use the QR code. Please feel free. The Jamboard is wide open for you to edit, and it's got 3 pages, one for education, one for higher ed and workplace, and one for community. Feel free to drop anything you'd like in there and go back and see if things get added to that afterwards. We'll use that as kind of a running commentary that happens behind this. Sometimes that's easier for people to do, to drop things in there. If you want to drop them in the chat, that continues to be a good way to do that too. We'll pop into the Jamboard every once in a while. So if you have it open and you start adding things to it, we'll pop over to it after we talk about each area. We'll start in the realm of education. I don't know if that's where most of us in the group today are from. I'm going to guess from looking at some of the names that is where we're from. So we'll start there. Again, as a tool, as a category of tools, I think right away we could see how this could be a very powerful option for the people we're working with. And it can be assistive technology. It checks the boxes for some of those opportunities to level the playing field, or give people opportunities to participate more fully in activities. But it already came up in the chat before, and this will be the first thing people say, like, yeah, that's all good. I like that, but kids are going to cheat. Okay. I mean, I think this goes back to our conversation about assistive tech in general. One of the first go-tos that people will have is you can't use that because they will cheat. It's a weak argument at best. It's again coming up with this idea: what is the task at hand, and is this an option to support them? Brian's dropping some ideas of how you would use this in the chat. Is use it for summarization, helping people come up with ideas, and thinking about how you are using this for different options of what you're being asked to accomplish. There are ways we could look at this that could be very effective as an AT tool in the classroom. Now, I'm going to give you some earth-shaking information here. Just banning it is not going to make it go away. I know, I'll say it again so you can pull that piece of information into your brain. Just banning it will not make this tool go away. This will be available everywhere. You don't stuff this genie back in the bottle. It is out. Students will find a way to use it. They will use it at home. They will use it out in the community. They will find options so they can use this. And Lauren asks in the chat, and are there plagiarism checkers? Hold that thought, Lauren. I think it's the next slide or the one after it. That will kind of do that for you. But I think as we go forward, this starts to be the conversation point, because if this is where schools are at, and if you've been an AT person for any amount of time, you've had the experience in education where you have a tool that needs to be utilized to help a student be successful that can't get used on the network for some reason, right? We all have those stories. We could fill the rest of the hour talking those stories. And what do we do when that happens? We explain that these tools are needed, and here's why. Here is the need this is meeting for this particular student. And so thinking about this idea of just simply banning it without the conversation is not the best way forward. This was a really great graphic that Matt Miller created from Ditch That Textbook. And it talks to this idea of plagiarism and cheating. And it has an arrow from the bottom where it says student created to the top where it says bot created. And then he asks, which of these would you consider cheating? And then from the bottom, closer to student created, it says student wrote all assignment content without consulting AI or the internet. And then it works its way up to the student consulted the internet and AI for ideas, then wrote and submitted. Student wrote main ideas. The AI generated a draft and offered feedback to improve. Student created multiple AI responses, used the best parts, edited and submitted. The AI created a response. The student read, edited, adjusted, and submitted. And then finally at the very top, the student plugged prompt into AI, copied response, and submitted to teacher. So as we moved from student created to bot created, where do we live in that scale there? This is a really interesting conversation because I look at this scale on the left-hand side of this graphic, and I'm like, boy, I think that there's something to be said in all of those beyond obviously the very top. Student plugged it in a prompt, copied the response and submitted it. Well, yeah, that seems like plagiarism. That's not what I'm talking about here. But some of these other ones, I think those can be really interesting discussions for us to bring up to individuals that we could use that to think about, well, where do we stand on this? What do we think is appropriate? And could we write that into the assignment or task that we're asking that student to complete as part of the process? So think about that. And so Kate points out that one at the top, if they use the AI to complete the task and submit it as their own, yeah, right, that's plagiarism. I'm trying to read the chat, but it's going fast. I do appreciate you guys putting that stuff in the chat there. But it's way too fast for me to read as I'm talking at the same time. But I think these are really good conversations and observations about where we're at here. Thinking about how you might use those. Some of the other questions he asks on the left-hand side, besides the which of these would you consider cheating, which of these is relevant to our students' future? And then finally, the last question is there, which of these would you use in your work as an adult? And so I think about that. And Kyle writes in the chat, I did see it because it's the last one there. If a student uses mom and dad to complete a task, is it scrutinized the same way? And so where are we at with this? And you know what? I'm going to leave this up for a second. If people want to come on mic to chat, I'm game. It's only because I can't read all your comments. So I feel like I'm missing a bunch of it. So I'll leave it up for you to chat. Anybody want to come on?
I honestly think it's really interesting, the conversation that's happening in the chat right now about Turnitin specifically. and how that tracks what a student does and like how they submit it and how similar it is to another piece of work that's been submitted or however it was submitted.
Mhm.
And I think that the interesting thing here to note is that now it's kind of taking on a conversation of let's replace an AI with a parent or an older sibling. How would you scrutinize or how would you manage the information in this situation otherwise?
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting.
I agree. I think that is interesting. Ken, I see your mic on. You want to chat?
Yeah, I'm confused. I don't know that this is plagiarism. There is no body that is being copied, any body of work that someone else created that's being copied and used here. This is generative. It's creating these sentences on the fly. And so I don't know if the tools like Turnitin are going to recognize it as plagiarism per se. This is a different thing altogether.
It is interesting, and it gets us to that idea, Ken, of thinking about what words mean in this case. And you're right. I mean, I think that what is this doing? These tools, these types of tools, they are taking a very large database of information and pulling pieces of it to give you a response to a question.
And it's doing it word by word.
Yeah.
It's constructing sentences word by word.
It's
not
still
taking a chunk, it's
plagiarism,
not taking
though.
a phrase and sticking it in somewhere.
Yeah.
We
interesting.
plagiarize works. We don't plagiarize people. I can plagiarize myself in a paper. So the fact that this is generative doesn't take away from the fact that it's plagiarism. This is a work developed by an AI, but you can still plagiarize that work by not changing it to adding any academic or knowledge-based thing, because you plagiarize works.
I guess I need the definition of plagiarism then, Mike.
Yeah, I think what Michael says is really interesting. Kate, I see your hand up. Go ahead, jump on.
Hi, everybody. I'm so sorry. I'm home unexpectedly with my children who have a snow day. So my engagement today is a little less than what I had hoped it to be. I'm finding the chat in this conversation really fascinating, just around defining plagiarism. And I wholly subscribe to the idea that, you know, when it comes to academics, the game isn't about catching kids doing something wrong. And this has really challenged us to rethink what the assignments look like. But I can't shake some of the comments here and some of the feedback that I'm hearing from colleagues. I would caution us from getting mired in like trying to define plagiarism and cheating, and just appreciate that if a student is going to something like ChatGPT to complete an assignment, to create something that would otherwise have been expected them to do on their own, and they then submit that as their own work, it's not authentic to the student's voice. So call it plagiarism, call it cheating. When we get that as an educator, it's not reflective of what that student knows and can do, right? And so I think we just need to look at it differently. I mean, at the end of the day, that work it doesn't belong to the student, whether it's something that's been copied or generated for the first time, it's not the student's work, right?
And wouldn't it be really simple to evaluate that if you ask the student to describe their work?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Ken. In fact, some of the strategies we're talking about in the classroom is, instead of saying, hey, this detector says that this is 99% likely to have been generated by AI, what did you do? Then the narrative and the dialogue needs to look like, hey, walk me through your thinking on this. You know, how did you go about completing this task? And show me your process. And good teaching isn't a write something cold and that's the summative. I mean, it's a process piece usually. So there should be steps along the way that indicate students' growth and development towards that final composition. So I agree with you. I think a lot, I mean, granted, that takes time. And when you have an army of students, we just dealt with this in an AP Lit class, who use the technology to cheat, you know, having those careful, thoughtful conversations, that's extremely time consuming, but ultimately worth it. Those are teachable moments.
Yes, it's a
One of the
great
things
point.
that this is Shelley Haven again. One of the things I'd like to do is to, look at the positive aspect of this, as Mike brought out. This is here. It's kind of like, what are we going to do with it? But not looking at what are we going to do to prevent problems.
Mhm.
How I would love to hear more about knowing that this capability exists, just like 20 years ago, knowing that the internet exists, knowing that 20 years before that, knowing that computers exist, how does that change how we teach things? How might that change? How can we leverage this and change what we're asking students to do? Obviously, this is an open-ended question, and it'll be answered over the next 5 to 10 years, but I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Shelley. I really like that question because I think you're right. I think it's how do we look at what we're doing in order to get the most benefit from an innovation like this? Natalie, jump in. I see your hand up. Go ahead.
So I work in the higher education environment. We've had some discussions about this, and one of the things that they did come up was just as educators need to be more intentional about what they're assigning to students, because this, these AI generators are generating facts and information. They're not generating past experiences and emotions that are tied to things. And so thinking about the activities that you're presenting to your students, and then maybe analyzing how you can, or how they can be made more meaningful or more personable to the student, or to something that's more specific to your class that the AI would not necessarily have access to. One of the instructors that I was having this conversation with, it made him think about in his discussion board questions that he does use for participation, in his class. Like, how can he reframe his discussion board questions so that it causes that more critical thinking on the student's part, or it relates it to something that they would experience. Now, the other side to that is
Sorry, Natalie, I'm moving to this slide while you talk because I think it's relevant.
Okay. I kind of jumped ahead.
I apologize. I was trying to wait for a pause. Sorry, go ahead.
I don't, I haven't heard, do people feel that everybody all of a sudden is using ChatGPT for every single assignment that's ever been given out? I don't know I'm sure people are messing around with it because it is a new thing, relatively new thing. It's really cool and maybe fun, but I don't know, are teachers feeling like all of their students are just using it? That would be a question I would have.
I fast forwarded us to the slides here because Natalie was talking higher ed, and I found this article, which is really interesting, about a professor who's requiring his students to use these AI tools in the courses, and how it was written into the syllabus of a policy, and put in there that said, I expect you to use AI, ChatGPT, or other tools like this in this class. In fact, some assignments will require it. Learning how to use AI is an emerging skill, and I provide tutorials in Canvas about how to use them. I'm happy to meet with you. I'm happy to meet and help with these tools during office hours or after class. So I'm just reading the chunk of the syllabus that's on the slide. And then he talks about some of the limitations, about beware of the limits. If you provide minimum effort prompts, you will get low quality results. The things we were talking about before. You need to refine your prompts in order to get good outcomes. This will take work. Don't trust anything it says. If it gives you a number or a fact, assume it is wrong unless you either know the answer or can check with another source. AI is a tool, but one that you need to acknowledge using. Please include a paragraph at the end of any assignment that uses AI, explaining what you use the AI for and what prompts you use to get the results. Failure to do so is a violation of the academic honesty policy. And then finally, it says, be thoughtful about what this tool is, about when this tool is useful. Don't use it if it isn't appropriate for the case or circumstances. And it's really interesting. I like that little chunk of that because I like the thoughtfulness in those few bullets and the higher level thinking that's going on here, that's wrapped around this tool set. And to me, that really, that might be my favorite thing that's in some of these slides. I just like the idea of having people think about what that looks like, why you would use it, explain why you used it, and demonstrate the steps you got to get there, whatever it was. Jenna put in the chat, this reminds me of a panic around Wikipedia in the 2000s, right? It's the same conversations that are coming back up every time we have something that is disruptive in some way. So thanks, Natalie. I just wanted to get to that before we moved forward because I realized we were talking about that part right there. Let me just see what else I know people were putting these things in the chat. Sorry that I'm hopping through the slides, but I'm just trying to pay attention to the time and make sure that everybody gets a chance to talk that you wanted to. Ken, did you want to talk? I see your mic is still on.
Oh.
No, that's
no,
okay. You can.
I would just love to see more conversation, critical thinking style conversation in classrooms where everyone participates in that process rather than sending a bunch of students off to write an essay. I just tried to picture when Socrates ever sent his students off to write an essay. I don't think it ever happened.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's a good way to look at that for sure. Natalie, do you have something else? I saw your mic was on.
Well, I did. And it just kind of goes back. I really appreciate the slide that you did bring up, because it seems like, it just seems to me that I would imagine the most of us here are in the education arena, and one of our jobs as educators is to educate. And so I think where better to help our students understand these tools, how to use them, when to use them, the pros and cons of using them and all that kind of stuff, than in an educational setting. And so I really appreciate that he said, I expect you to use it. I want you to use it. It kind of takes the mystery out of it too. Sometimes, like when you, like sometimes, when you open that door, people go through it and they think, oh, wow, it's really not any different than going to Google or whatever. I mean, sometimes when the mystery is removed, it becomes a non-issue. But if it's this thing, this deep, dark secret, then people want to delve into it and like, ooh, what am I missing out on or whatever.
Right.
But as educators, I don't know. I just feel like it's kind of one of our responsibilities is to kind of educate along of all of these things too, the good, the bad, and the ugly of it, and kind of help guide our students into a better understanding and knowledge of a tool like this and other tools as well.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Natalie. Go ahead, Shelley. Oh, no, Shelley, your mic's on.
Sorry, Tourette's
No.
syndrome.
That's okay.
Literally Tourette's syndrome. So I didn't mean to do that.
No problem. That's okay. I'm trying to be very aware of the mics that pop on the side toolbar here as I go forward. I mentioned before, I'm going to go backwards for a second. This idea, and we talked about this, and someone brought it up in the chat. I'm sorry, I don't remember who brought it up earlier, that this idea of using AI is not new by any long shot. Here's a great little infographic that shows 15 tools that you can use in the classroom. Some of them are tools that are not new in any way, shape, or form. Grammarly, the PowerPoint speaking coach, Speechify, some of these things are around and we've been using them, but never within the context of saying, hey, we're using an AI. But these tools are all employing an AI behind the scenes to do the work that they're doing. And I think that also, to Natalie's point, starts to demystify this a little bit. It's like, this is not some boogeyman hiding behind a wall somewhere. I mean, these are tools that have been in our classrooms and we've been using. These things like ChatGPT are just newer versions of that with a different set of outcomes that can come from them. So I think those are really interesting. The chat is amazing. Like I'm stealing every minute when someone else is talking to look at the chat, and this is great. And so I realized that an hour clearly was never going to do this topic justice, and that's okay, because these are going to be lots of hours stacked together. But what I'm going to do when we're done is I will download the chat. I will pull your names out of it so that your names are not on there. And then I will post the chat back into the slide deck so that you all have access to everything in the chat. You could certainly save it on your end if you'd like before we're done, but I'll make sure I do that because there's some great stuff in there. Great resources. Mia, hello, join the conversation.
Hi. So in the chat, as everybody else has said, some great stuff. And I was thinking about the Wikipedia comment in particular. And it makes me think, I just read this article yesterday about a woman that single-handedly just added hundreds of Black and brown inventors and such to Wikipedia, because when it first started out, it only was really written in majority by white males. And so there was a lacking, and like someone mentioned that Oliver had done something and, talked about, there being a possible barrier as we go on for, people who are underprivileged or from different socioeconomic backgrounds. And it really just makes me think that, this, just like anything, we need to really be aware of the barriers and challenges and pitfalls, so that we can share that with students just like anything else, and then harness the power of it. I think everything's really scary when, when it comes out, but for us as adults, we've had a different, a different a different way of doing things. And so now we see ChatGPT, and a lot of us are like, oh, we can harness this. We know how to ask questions, right? But kids are incredibly, I don't know, they need to be taught. And so I think if we can teach them how, if we can get ahead of the curve and teach them how, I just think we'll be a lot better off, and then help them and guide them to teach themselves and others.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's so true. I think that's true. I love the ideas that we're talking about here, is that we're all talking about little higher level kinds of things. About it's about implementation of something and how to use that to make the things that we're doing more effective with it, whether it's teaching or learning, either of those that we're looking at here. And I think that's really the conversation that we're having here, which is great. And I see that we're 10 minutes before the top of the hour, and that's okay. It's typical fashion. I did not expect to get through 90% of the things I put together, and that's okay. I did want to, and we will get back to the Jamboard when we will wrap up with that at the end. But one of the things that I always like to remind people, and again, it goes back to this idea of tools that you've been using that are AI. If you've ever used in a business setting or for a meeting, if you've ever used Otter, if you've never noticed, Otter is otter.ai. It is an AI. That's exactly what it's doing. You're using it. You can use it to capture information from meetings and assign it to different speakers as it goes through. And it has audio synced with text from a transcription. And so there's a great example of a tool that's been in our toolkit for a while now. That is another AI example of tools as we go forward. I think this idea of how we use this is going to become really interesting. So on the screen is a screenshot from an NPR article that says, has AI reached the point where a software program can do better work than you? And the link to that is in the picture there if you click out. But what's interesting, if you take that for some of these real world examples, how many of us use that autocomplete in our mail, whether you use Gmail or anything else, where it just magically gives you what you probably will be writing, which every time, it still to this day shakes me to the core every time that it's exactly what I was about to write, and yet there it is already done and I can just move past it. And it's that same idea. And I know we were talking before about that idea of writing in your voice. And here on the left-hand side was a thread of tweets. I've linked the thread onto that picture about how to use a tool like an AI tool like a ChatGPT to have it write in your voice. And so the author of this tweet shares an example of you insert a sample of things you've written, and then underneath that, the prompt is analyze the writing style and write about building a business as the above author would write. And then we start seeing how this could be used to perhaps save time and give us something that perhaps is in our voice. We're starting to be closer to our voice and what we think we might, how we think we might write as we go forward. Automate tasks, the other one that was in this kind of workplace example. If you have tasks that you're doing over and over again, that are emails, you're sending bunches of emails out and you're customizing each one, put that into something like a ChatGPT and then tell it in the prompt, remove any personally identifiable information and replace it with this placeholder, and then send these things out. So you start to see the ability to automate some of this as we go forward. Those are great options of how this technology could be used to help us. And I wanted to get to this. Ken, you're already on the screen, and I pulled this out of our conversation at the Maker Roundtable. And I was hoping you were here, Ken, because I knew I wouldn't do it justice. Do you want to share like a 2-minute thought of the conversation we had about this?
Yeah, just to say that when I first heard about chatbots, I thought, my goodness, is there a way to use chatbots to facilitate real-time communication for AAC users, which, as far as I'm concerned, has always been the holy grail, the way that a non-speaking individual can become part of a real-time social world. And then when I saw a few features of ChatGPT, I thought, my goodness, this thing could become, or something like it could become that generator of prompts that generated the kinds of sentences you might say, because it has an intimate knowledge of you, and it has intimate knowledge of the situation you're in, and because it's a natural language processor, how to form sentences that are intelligible by your communication partner, who's not the person who lives with you every day, but some person that's just in your friend group. And you would still play a role in it by you choosing the response that comes out of your device. And you have an opportunity to provide information after the conversation about, yeah, it would have been better if you had generated a sentence like this. But getting that real-time interaction with the rest of humanity, I think this is the first step in it.
Yeah, Ken, looking at this slide here, and obviously this came from an earlier, this is Shelley again, that came from that earlier conversation. The first thing that comes to mind, the situational awareness is, I'm thinking of, co-writer word prediction and using its word bank. So if it knows I'm writing about Albert Einstein, it's going to bias its predictions to Albert Einstein type words. I'm seeing the same sort of thing here, that if it knows who I'm talking to, where I am, you might see a dynamic AAC device that changes or biases certain options in the communication device toward the situational communication that the person is in at that moment. That could be groundbreaking. I like that.
Yeah,
I agree. I see a lot of potential for ChatGPT here, especially with the ability to edit tone and voice with this. Like, there's a lot that can be done with specifically language modeling that I think that makes a lot of sense for AAC. I think this is a really good and helpful conversation to talk about what task with the design of technology and what it functions does this play into. And I think a lot of people were concerned about it being used as a resource for research when that's not. It takes knowledge on our part about how this technology functions. And I think this aligns really close with the function of the technology as well as the need of the person.
Yeah, Michael, I think that's a really great point. This idea of this ChatGPT-like thing, whatever happens in this flowchart here, is a part of the bigger system. And just this whole idea. And when this came up, this actually was from our Makers Roundtable that happened earlier. It was earlier in February. Are we still in February? Yeah, earlier in February. And the link to the entire recording is on the next slide. And so you could watch the whole entire thing. We had a long conversation about this. And, Ken brought this up. This was Ken's flowchart. And it's still, every time I see it, Ken, I find myself staring up into the ceiling to think about this more. I mean, this is very, this really gets to that kind of heart of the power of a tool and what it could do with the right input. It goes back to our conversation from the chat before, the right input to get me to the right output, but really facilitating an opportunity to get a user so much closer to that real-time back and forth, and eliminate some of those pauses that we see in communication. which is great.
I just
Excellent.
want to, this is Yao speaking.
Hi, Yao.
I'm also a researcher in AAC and conversational AI. I found what's intriguing about having ChatGPT, as Chris mentioned, hi Chris, was we will probably see very soon early adopters from the AAC communities, some users who really would appreciate the word prediction features, or there are more, I have to say, like language rich in their expressive capability will really want to actually have better word prediction systems. I was thinking more on the backend data problems. We have struggled for years with actually aggregating a corpus of good data from AAC users and to really support their expressive communication, also to track language growth. So these are the things like, you know, labor work is intensive and not accurate and tricky across different contexts. But if ChatGPT can follow the users across multiple contexts and can do those work in the back end, and obviously we need buy-in from AAC vendors to, to let them take over some of the paid services they were putting out there. This can be very innovative and life-changing for a lot of our users because they have limited resources to support the overall bigger picture of, I was thinking more longitudinal growth because it's not well documented. Yeah, I'm done speaking.
Thanks. Yeah, that was great. I appreciate that feedback for sure. Yeah, it's very similar to the conversation we had in the Maker Roundtable. And I see Chris is in the chat adding those things as well with the users that he spoke to, that one was really excited about it, one not so much. You know, and Mia points out, does this then become something that people cannot afford, by the way? Yeah, I mean, those are questions, right? I mean, those are those bigger conversational questions of what does this become? That could be a real detriment if the power of this could be harnessed, and then yet it was still too much for some people to use because of cost and price. That would not be great, obviously. I'll just state the obvious right there as we go. Well, everybody, I'm looking at the clock. We have exactly 1 minute. We didn't even get to the Jamboard. Please feel free to keep adding things to the Jamboard. I'm going to get you to the slide link so that you can download. Oh, no, I'm not. Hold on. I want to get you to the slide with the QR code if you want it, just to have the slides. As you can see, because we didn't get to mostly everything, the slide deck will become even more critical for you to continue looking at that. Naomi put it in the chat. Thank you, Naomi. Like I said, I will take the chat and pull it down, and I will make it anonymous, and I will post it back in there so that you guys have everything. And we'll continue this conversation. Obviously, this is not just going to be a one-time conversation. We'll bring this back every once in a while. We'll look at the Jamboard and see if there's some commonality that we can have discussions like this that are focused around a certain area, perhaps, and we'll look at it that way. So everybody, I appreciate your participation. Thank you for joining the conversation. That made it much easier for me. So I'm always appreciative of that. So thank you. Again, thank you for joining us. And we hope we will see you soon at something else. Thanks. Have yourselves a great day. Thanks.